There are also questions surrounding whether testing materials are short in supply here in France. And to talk about COVID-19 testing, I'd like to welcome to the program Nathalie Bontoux. She's the Associate Vice President of a life science and diagnostic firm. Thank you so much for being with us here on France 24. First of all, can you tell us what's needed for these testing kits and whether France can potentially actually start the process even before the end of the lockdown period?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are actually different tests based on when you test. So as you start developing the disease, what we're looking for is cell infected by the virus. And usually we check for genetic material. So if you read a little bit, that's what's called RT-PCR kits. Some other countries are doing sequencing, but basically you look at genetics. And then as the disease progresses, we can actually look for antibodies. So there are also different tests related to that. And then finally, for patients in emergency care, they usually do chest scan. So different technology require different supply.
Different technologies. You're very familiar, as much as you can be up until this point, with the research. Is the government, the French government, accepting help from firms like yours? Because surely more test kits we have, the more we can stem the transmission of the virus, and potentially normalcy could resume for those that aren't infected.
Yeah, so there are several aspects to your question, actually. So France has decided a strategy where currently we're only using what's called CE-IVD tests, which means that they are regulated tests. In other countries in Europe, they've accepted research use only tests, which are less regulated. So that would actually broaden the possibility in terms of testing. That's one aspect. The other aspect, as I said, is that there are different techniques that you can use. So it really requires an entire strategy of, what technique you can use around what stage of the disease. Right now, we're relying a lot on RT-PCR, but we could, do a mix of the different techniques, basically. And then in terms of supply, and to address more directly your question, I think the French government has reached out to some companies. As far as I can see, with my industry friends, they haven't really reached to the entire industry. And that's why we're really lobbying to create a consortium with manufacturers, with lab providers and scientists, so that we can look at this more holistically and make the right decision for France. And yes, absolutely, we can and will increase our testing capacity. I think the authorities have announced that today. But I'm ambitious, and I think we can do a lot more, actually.
So lastly, if the government does decide to make this outreach more widespread with various firms across the country, based on what you're saying, could France even become, or is this exaggerating a little bit, a global leader when it comes to coronavirus testing? Do we have those capabilities?
It's a very good question. So I think we can lead in the way we address the challenge. That's unfortunately not really what we're doing right now. I think the reality is, we rely on a global economy. Supplies will be in high demand globally. That's the one difference compared to the Chinese and Korea situation, where they were early in the disease, and now it's, as we know, a worldwide pandemic. So I just want to refer to the fact that, and give credit to the WHO, who has called yesterday through their arms the fine for, a global alliance and really sharing more broadly information between suppliers and making sure that we have a coordinated response across the world. And I think that's essential.
Nathalie Bontoux, I'd like to thank you for speaking to us here on France 24
Thank you.
about coronavirus testing here in the country.